Hi, and welcome. And real quick, the Podcast Engineering School, the online training program, is starting on April 4th. Go to the website for all the details, podcastengineeringschool.com. That's right, it's going to be online training. Barry, you like online training, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
I thought so. So check out the website for more information, podcastengineeringschool.com. Barry, doesn't Mary sound good?
Oh, forget it.
That's right. She's got her mic back. All right. Well, this is session number 47. And hold on a second.
Oh, how poetic. That's going to be my birthday this year.
Really?
Yeah.
47.
47.
Oh, man. You have so many great years left. It's so nice.
Awesome.
Someday we'll be like, next year I'm going to be 87.
And we'll still be making radio and podcasts, probably.
Can you turn up my headphones? I'm getting feedback.
What?
Sorry. Jeez. Anyway, session 47 of the Podcast Engineering Show. You made it here. Let's do it. Yes. That's right. You may have butt dialed your way into this session of the show, but you're here. I hope you enjoy it. My name is Chris Curran. I'm the founder of Fractal Recording and the Podcast Engineering School. That's what this show's all about, is really the school, helping individuals learn how to produce and engineer podcasts at a professional level. I've worked with the likes of Forbes and Dun & Bradstreet and a lot of other companies and business authors as well. Each week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We get down and dirty. We talk shop about the audio engineering side of podcast engineering. We don't talk about the marketing and the listens and all this other stuff. That's all great stuff and arguably even more important. But this show is all about the sound quality as my voice cracks more. Right? Isn't that great, Mary?
Perfect. Right on cue.
Jeez. All right. Well, I have a background in audio engineering in the music business many years ago. And, well, not that many. But when I entered podcasting about 5 years ago, I realized that most everyone in podcasting knows virtually nothing about actual audio engineering and fundamentals. And it shows. You can hear it. So that's what this show is all about. If you want to be a podcast producer or an engineer, you can listen to the show. You'll pick up a ton of techniques. If you're just a regular podcaster, some of it might be over your head, but not much. And over time, you'll have such a wonderful education. It's astounding. And the feedback I get from listeners is just great. Thank you all so much for listening and giving me feedback and enjoying the show, because, I mean, obviously I enjoy doing it. And I think that probably helps you like to listen to the show. But it's great that you're engaging with me and letting me know that this is that you like the show, and that it just helps me keep doing it, keep up the energy level and the passion for this, because it's not easy to do a podcast every week, and everybody knows that. And I don't only do this one, I do others too. So of course Barry is with me. He's the maintenance guy in my old building in New Jersey, but he comes out here once a week to sit with me doing this show. Right, Barry?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's right. And Mary Mazurek is back.
Hello.
She's the second person who's making a return appearance, and her mic sounds great, right?
Oh, forget it.
Thank you.
And what do you think about Mary's last name, Mazurek?
That's a tongue twister right there.
No, it's not really. It's not that bad. All right. Well, look, Mary, she has the same setup as last time, which was and I'm still introducing you, Mary, just so you know. Okay. This is part of the introduction. So Mary still is using her Shure MV51 mic. And are you still using your homemade pop filter with pantyhose?
Yes, I am.
Okay, she is. And so what is Mary going to need, Barry, to take her setup to the next level?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
All right, well, Mary, so now you know, put it on your shopping list.
I'm putting it on my list, yep.
That's great. So Mary, I'm so happy you're back. We're going to have such a great session today, and it's going to be different from the average session, different from, the standard setup of a podcast engineer, producer, and we're going to talk about live events music events and broadcasting them live on the radio and then turning all that into a podcast. So Mary Mazurek, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes, you are a radio producer. You're an audio engineer with 25 years experience, probably more than 25. And you are a radio producer at WFMT in Chicago. And you also work on the show Live from WFMT. And that's what we're going to talk about today, that show, because, you know, a lot of musical acts come through there, right? And they broadcast live on that show. And you're also an instructor. That's right. That's why everybody loves your episodes, Mary. You're an instructor in the Department of Audio Arts and Acoustics at Columbia College in Chicago.
That's right.
What are you teaching lately over there?
Actually, this is, the day of our interview is my first day back for the semester, and I am teaching a class called Live Sound Recording, which focuses on stereo miking techniques and capturing self-balancing music like classical music.
Okay. And then you also mentioned to me when we talked last week, I think, about some live installations of audio or something.
Oh, yeah. I have a creative itch that I need to scratch. So I also am an interdisciplinary artist. So I work primarily with media, and I really like the form of installation art. So that is immersive art. So the viewer actually kind of walks into the space. And I like to use audio and visual elements with that. And I'm also teaching part of a class based on that as well this semester. So I'm looking forward to that. That's
so cool. Some sort of a space that's set up as an art installation or an art presentation, and then you would walk in and there's sound elements to this presentation, right?
Exactly.
That's so cool. So what do? You have speakers here and there hidden, and you play different things, or?
I've done a couple. One, I did a meditation garden, which was a bonsai garden that was projected into a larger space, and it had surround sound birds, and you could go and sit and meditate or whatever. Another one I did was something called recycled sound. Since I work in radio, we have a lot of used CDRs, which we have recycled because we have affiliates. We send them programming on CDs, a lot of them, and they come back, and we have all of this material that is no longer useful. So I started making things with it, and I made curtains of CDs by drilling holes in them and linking them together and adding audio elements to that and whatnot. So
that's cool. It just creates this atmosphere. It's just something. It's so experiential, and that's the whole point of it, right? Is that you can't just look at a picture of it, or you can't just hear a recording of it. You have to be there, looking, hearing, smelling,
touching in some cases.
Yeah. And, recently I've thought a lot about this virtual reality stuff, because visually you understand how they're going to incorporate it. You wear that big thing on your head, and apparently you can see all the way from your peripheral vision to the other side peripheral, and it looks like you're there or something, right? But the sound, how are they going to handle the sound? That's always the trick. Sometimes that's the trickiest part, right?
Right, because we hear 300 and we hear 360 degrees around us, and that's hard to reproduce.
Yeah, it really is. Even I've listened to some of the recordings where it's binaural audio, and they, it's like there's an app for it. I forget the name, but you can actually pull up these sounds. There's one that's like you're sitting in a chair getting a haircut, and you hear you hear these scissors going around your head, and it is. I mean, it's freaky. You can't play it too loud because it'll freak you out.
Yeah, no, they're pretty fun. I have a binaural head as well as one of my
toys. Really?
Yeah, so it's basically a dummy head. It has pinna, so the flaps of skin that are on the side of our heads.
Right.
So when you record with this kind of device, it gives you spatial cues like you would hear on your own. And a lot of the spatial cues come not only from the mass in between your ears, but also the pinna attached to your head, so that your ears, the shapes and the contours of your ears, that actually gives you a lot of spatial information. So it allows you, when you listen over headphones, to hear elements like to this, not only to the front and to the sides, but also in back and above, below.
Right.
So you get all of those spatial cues as well with that kind of system. But you need to listen on headphones.
Right. You need to listen on headphones. Or I guess technically you could be exactly situated between a pair of speakers and not move or something.
Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, but I don't think you really get the rear cues quite as well that way.
Yeah, you're right. And it's funny. I was watching Jordan Peterson. He's a guy I've been following online, and he talks about. Well, he's a psychologist and he's kind of like a philosopher too. Deep stuff, deep intellectual, but also he has a heart. He talks about wisdom and stuff. He's not just some crazy intellectual arguing, the minutia of psychology and all that. But he was talking about the senses, and he was talking about the eyes mainly, that really humans are visual animals because our eyesight is better than pretty much everything on Earth except for birds of prey. And then he's talking about our other senses and that really they all work together, which we know that already. But I was thinking, as you were talking about the ears, the actual shape of our ears, like I think literally the sound hitting our ears, not going in our ears, but just hitting our ears, because our ears are kind of sensitive, like the earlobes and everything, like, and they got those little tiny hairs on them and stuff. And like, I think that itself, it's almost like a physical, you can almost feel where a sound is coming from in a sense.
Oh, sure. I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. And we can never turn our hearing off, It's our first line of defense. I mean, we will often hear danger before we see it. So I think that's been our a line of defense, a primitive line of defense, because if you heard the saber-toothed tiger roar, you best run in the other direction.
Right. That's so true. All right, so let's talk about this. You, on your show, live from WFMT, well, you're not the host, right? You're just one of the engineers.
I'm the engineer of that show. Okay. I'm the music producer of that show.
Got it. So that show, you have musical acts come in and you mic them up and you broadcast it live on the radio, and then afterwards you turn that into a podcast. So let's start from the beginning. Like, do the musicians in the band always set up in the same space, or are you ever on location?
Oh, I do a lot of different types of live broadcasts for WFMT. I'm really lucky to work for them, really lucky to have a station like them in Chicago, because we broadcast so much live music, and we do it in studio. We go to remote locations, and it's a lot of fun. So Live from WFMT is one of the shows I do in studio. So basically they come to the station. We have a pretty large live room. We've been able to fit an orchestra in there. It's a little tight, but we've done it.
Right.
But it's a nice spacious room. It's got some life to it, because primarily what we do there is classical music and folk music, and the reflections in the room help to reinforce the actual sound and help the musicians hear each other. Because technically, most of the time you don't give classical musicians headphone mixes, because they prefer to hear each other and balance with each other in the actual space.
Right. Because that's what they're used to as well, probably.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they'll do it. And my job, I feel, is to reproduce that as truly as possible by staying as technologically out of the way as I possibly can.
Right.
Right, because they're going to get their balance themselves. I'm working with world class musicians all the time. So, but how I mic in the studio is different from how I mic in a venue,
on location,
like
right?
A concert venue.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if you'd want to talk about that, or if you want to talk about my process
Yeah.
In studio, process on remote.
Yeah,
I
want to talk about all that. So let's stay in studio. So we're in the studio, which I like the idea that the room has a little bit of life to it, because if a room is too dead, then it's weird. It kind of sucks the energy.
Weird. It is kind of weird. Okay, so in the studio.
Well, let me ask you this let's put it in perspective. So you have them there, you're going to mic them up somehow. It's going to run through a mixing board, which I want to know exactly how that happens. And then then apparently that mixing board is already hooked up to the feed to the antennas of the station, and it just kind of flows and just gets broadcast.
Okay. Yeah, I can start with that.
So tell me that process.
Okay. So basically, I know who's coming in advance, so I do some pre-setup. I like to work with stereo pairs, so there will be like a main stereo pair pickup. But in the studio, it's not like a concert hall. The concert hall will help reinforce and project out the sound more. So a lot of times I don't have to mic as heavily, but in the studio I have to mic more heavily. So I will put up spot mics as well on each musician and mix that in with the stereo pair. So the stereo pair, you can think about it as two identical microphones. They'll have some kind of usually angle to them, maybe a little space in between. If I want a really wide stereo image, I will put a lot of space in between the microphones. It just kind of depends what it is.
Got it.
And that is trying to kind of simulate how one might hear the ensemble or the musicians.
Right.
But as I said, it's a room and not a hall. A hall will project forward and you'll be able to hear fine. The room doesn't quite do that, so I need a little more detail. So I put individual mics up and I blend those in with the stereo pair. And then I also use some reverberation as well. We have a Lexicon 300 outboard unit, which is not a new product at all, but it is a good sounding reverb. Right. It is a really good sounding reverb. So I'll put something like a hall reverb on it or a chamber reverb on it or something to that effect.
Right. And the stereo pairs you're using, do you have to worry about phasing at all? Or it's kind of like just because the sound is moving around and blending in the room itself that you don't really have to worry about phasing?
That is a great question. Yes, we are always concerned about that. And there are different stereo pairs that handle phase differently. And we actually use some phase anomalies with some of the stereo pairs to create an image. So where the instruments are placed in the stereo field is based on some phase anomalies. And that is caused anytime we put space in between microphones.
Right.
So there's a type of technique called coincident, or it's often called XY, where you put the microphone capsules pretty much in the same spot. In the ideal world, there is no phase cancellation between those two microphones because sound is getting to each capsule at the same time.
Right.
So that's going to be mono-compatible, and we're concerned about that in broadcast because, if you're driving in your car and you're getting to the outer band of our broadcast width, it's going to go to mono.
Right. I was going to say, a lot of times radio stations, if you're not getting good signal, they'll go to mono. Exactly.
And then also we're dealing with streams, which go through a codec, so they're encoded and some of the information is taken out to thin the stream.
Right.
It's data thinned.
Right.
So that also is going to bring out more of the phase anomalies. It'll show up more because of that. So that we have to be concerned about that. So I always check everything in mono before we go on the air just to make sure I'm hearing everything I want to hear.
Right. And when you're checking a stereo pair of mics in mono, you can kind of tell, and I'm remembering this from years ago because I haven't done this in a while, but if you're checking a stereo pair and you hear it in stereo, it sounds fine. Then you bring it to mono and it actually, like, the volume almost gets lower.
Right.
And that's how you could tell that something's canceling.
Yeah, so there's some cancellations. So we're looking for monocompatibility. So the frequency response should remain the same if something is monocompatible.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, you'll lose the violin's over on the left and the bass is on the right in the image, but the frequency response should remain the same. However, I was talking about some other stereo pairs that use phase anomalies to help you localize where the instruments are. So that happens anytime you put any kind of space in between the microphones. The space tends to give you more depth, so more front to back information, but it's not mono compatible. So I still check that in mono. I still like those pairs. I check them in mono, and what I expect to hear is some of the airiness going away because that's created by the space.
I see.
If there's more than that missing, then I've got a problem. I've got a placement problem, and I got to go and rethink my positioning.
Okay. And by the way, for you listening, if you want to hear some phasing and some things disappearing when you go from stereo to mono, U2 has a song called Mysterious Ways. And the very beginning, actually, I think it's I don't know if it's throughout or if it's just in the beginning or it might be the beginning and the end, whatever. There's like some sort of bongo or some percussion. It's all the way, I think it's on the left or whatever, but there's some on the right. They phased it. So when you go to mono, that disappears.
Oh, I got to go check that out again.
It's weird. It's like, dude, it's gone. Or so low that you really can't hear it. But it's almost like magic. Phasing is so cool.
Yeah. You know what? It was interesting. I'm not going to mention the name, but I was at a studio of a fairly well-known producer in Chicago, and he was playing a track, and it had this B3, and he was talking about how he put all these mics on the Leslie cabinet and blah, blah, blah. And I could tell there was a problem because I couldn't tell where the sound was coming from. It sounded kind of like a mushy wash across the stereo field, and I popped it into mono and it disappeared.
Oh, well, hey, you could use it as an effect, or that can be a problem. It's
right.
And of course,
but I mean, we have to be careful now because of how everybody listens. Rarely does anybody have like a high-end hi-fi stereo system at home. We're all listening on our iPhones, on earbuds, and that's lossy compression. So it's throwing out information it deems not important. So if you're not anchoring the image and you're having all these phase anomalies, it's going to make poor decisions when it data compresses the information, and it's going to sound odd.
Right. And so in podcasting, by the way, these things probably never come into play because if you just have one voice on one microphone, there's never a phasing issue.
That's easier. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, if you have musical elements you're bringing into a podcast, like, for instance, royalty-free music and such.
Sure.
That's already mixed, and it might be in stereo, but it's already been mixed and done.
Right. Though we do have to be careful, even if we're dealing with one microphone, we can have time delays because of reflective surfaces near the microphone. So if I'm talking to you into this microphone, the direct sound of my voice is coming to you before any reflections. So if I'm in a very live room, you're going to get the reflection too, and it's going to make the voice sound hollow.
Right. And the closer the wall is, or the closer the reflective surface is, the more that probably happens.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's tricky. We'll have to test that. Like put two mirrors on the side of my head or something.
Check my hair while I'm doing the podcast.
Actually, we did a demo. Me and my friends did we used to be in a rock band, like a hardcore band, actually.
Oh, cool.
And we were doing some song, and we were overdubbing a second vocal. And I think my friend, I don't know what it was. I think there was like some sort of a jug in the room. He picked up the jug and just talked right near the opening of the jug, and it did this weird thing to his voice. And we were like, "Oh, cool, man! Let's record that way." So he recorded a track, talking basically into this jug right near the mic, and it made this weird sound. But it was cool for the track.
Cool. Awesome.
Of course, that stuff happens all the time, but not with you because you're dealing with classical musicians. Tell the violin player.
You know what? I had a piece. This is the first time I've ever mic'd this, but the piece involved pouring ping pong balls into the piano.
Whoa!
Yeah, it was awesome.
Oh, that is so funny. Wow.
So yeah, no, I get some some of the new classical music, some interesting things. I've worked with the Kronos Quartet at WFMT a couple of times, and I'm not sure if you know who they are, but they are a new music ensemble, and it's not just violin, viola, cello. It's that plus effects plus pre-mix playback stuff. Plus, there's all kinds of stuff going on. I think I had like 32 inputs for that session.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. By the time we were done. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And I had to give them headphone mixes because they had to hear the pre-mix stems and all of that stuff. So
right. Pre-recorded elements.
I worked hard that day, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a lot. 32 inputs. I mean, that takes time to get it set up and get it leveled.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? And at the time, we had just had a new console put in, an F5 Fusion. So it's an Avid board that basically came from Euphonics. So this is a new board for me. And they were coming in the next day. But there was a session in there beforehand, so I couldn't get in there and preset things. So I had to wait until they were done. So at 10:30 at night, here I am running signal through the console because they wanted 8 sends and returns, which almost never ever. No, it actually never happens with classical music. So I'm trying to figure out how to do this.
Right.
And the Fusion has all kinds of options. It has so many bells and whistles that I don't even think I've learned all of them, but I needed to know how to send 8 effect sends and returns for this session. So I think I left at 2 a.m.
Oh, wow.
to come back at 8 a.m. I was like contemplating, should I just sleep under the console?
Yeah.
I've
You're
done
looking
it before.
at the couch like,
I've done it before, but I'm going like, oh, I'm too old for this. I'm going to my bed.
Wow.
But it went very smoothly. Their tech crew showed up and said, this is the smoothest we've ever experienced at a radio station.
Oh, nice.
And I'm just like fist bump and like,
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's really good. That makes such a difference when you can run a session and do it smoothly and people appreciate it. But even if they don't appreciate it, it's still good as long as it runs smooth because it's fluid and it's those little issues and especially dumb little things.
And it's always a dumb little thing usually. It's almost always a dumb little thing.
It's almost always a dumb little thing. And they just kill the vibe.
Right, it does. Yeah.
But anyway, Barry, do you think Mary had any trouble bringing up those 32 inputs and getting good levels and stuff? Do you think she had any problem with that?
I don't think so.
I never get to use that clip. I finally thought of a place to use it. I don't think so. I'm going to play it again.
I don't think so.
Anyway, when you mentioned the pouring ping pong balls into the piano, I just heard yesterday, my wife and I were driving, and there's some radio station that plays like little comedy clips. They actually played the Jerky Boys crank call where the guy was he called the piano tuner and he said that his dog fell in the piano and he's all tangled in the wires and he's snapping. The guy's like, you want me to come and your dog is biting and barking? What am I going to do? Oh, it was a classic one.
Oh, that's funny.
Jerky Boys. But of course they cut all the curse words. I mean, that's the whole thing about the Jerky Boys.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't even make sense without that. It was like, what? Really, it almost didn't make sense without the curses. That's how important they are to a Jerky Boys phone call.
Right.
Anyway, all right. So you mic it all up. You get it going through the board.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then tell me, are you also recording? Well, how are you recording this? I know you're recording it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really happy about my room there at FMT. So I said we got the F5 Fusion. We have 8 channels of Grace Pre's. I love those things.
Really?
So yeah. So if I can, I've got 16 channels of it. So I basically use the Grace Pre's over the Euphonics Pre's.
Right.
But the Euphonics Pre's are fine. The Fusion's Pre's are fine.
Got it.
But I like those Grace Pre's a lot. So I'll run it through there. It'll come through the console. This console can be a control surface for ProTools, or it can be a standalone console. So I'm just using it as a standalone console for live things.
Got it.
I am recording to 2 Tascam flash recording devices. They're rack units. I can't remember their number. I've also got a CD burner. I'm running that live too. And then out of the music control room, it's routed to the air control room, which we have manned with an announcer on site. I have an announcer for my program in the studio with the musicians because they have some interview and some talk in between the music. But then there's also another announcer on the board in the air control room, and he or she will do the breaks and the news and stuff in between. So I come up on a stereo fader in the music control room, and from the music control room, it goes through our processing to our antenna on the, it's called the Willis Towers, but it's always going to be the Sears Tower. Yeah.
Okay, so then it goes from it goes stereo through all your processing and out to the antenna.
Yeah, it also streams on the internet live as well.
Okay, and so is the tower's not right on top of your building, so it actually has to go through wires to another building and up.
Right. I think we're on a T1 line to Sears Tower. Yeah, it's in Chicago, it's almost impossible to broadcast anything that way anymore because of all the buildings. Right. So if you want to get signal out anywhere, it's got to be on the Sears Tower, the John Hancock, or one of the other large buildings downtown.
Got it. And for streaming live on the internet, how do you stream that?
Well, I actually don't have anything to do with that process. It just happens automatically. So any of all of our programming is
I see.
Live.
So all the programming, it's already hooked up to some some streaming software or something that's just streaming everything. So as soon as you guys go on the air, it just pipes that out on the air as well.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And then when you're recording it in stereo or multi-track? Just stereo.
Stereo. If I'm doing like a written album session or something, I'll obviously multi-track it. But
got it.
But for this, it's stereo.
Okay. Now, when you said you in the room with the musicians, you have an announcer person who might do some interviews with the musicians and stuff. When that mic is live, when that person is talking through the announcer mic, do you mute all the instrument mics at that time?
I don't usually all of it. I will bring them down because I don't want to completely change the ambience of the space.
Okay. Oh, that's a good, that works.
Yeah,
right?
And also sometimes we get artists who are eager to start playing. So if their mics are all the way down, then
you might miss it. Oh,
right.
That makes sense. So how do you have them? You have all like the instruments to like a group fader, and then you just bring it down?
Usually I just pull them down, or if they're not talking from their playing position, sometimes I have them come over to the announcer and sit down in front of them. I'll just pull down the stereo pair a bit and leave the instrument mics up or something.
Oh, I see.
So it depends. Nice.
And now, so before we go on site, like to a concert hall or something, let's talk about the podcasting aspect. I mean, look, compared to everything you're doing, the podcasting aspect is like a tiny, tiny detail, and totally understand that, but we still want to talk about it.
Right. So as a radio station, we kind of got into podcasting after the fact. So basically what we do is we offer a number of our programs, especially the live programs, available for podcast. So after, say, live from WFMT or any of the other live broadcasts, if the performers approve it, we will, or I will in this case, I'll take it and I'll work on ProTools, I'll master it. And I don't usually have to do too much to it. I might do some light compression, maybe some light EQ to it. And then I'll format it to MP3 and put all the metadata in it and things like that. And then I will upload it to the server and link it to our webpage.
Okay, so you're uploading it to the media hosting service, whatever it is that the station uses. Okay, and then you're just putting it on your website. So is it also going to, as a podcast feed, going to iTunes and other destinations?
Yes. Yes,
Oh,
it is.
okay.
Yeah, it does get picked up by iTunes as well. So you can either go to our site and hear it, or
I see.
you should be able to find it on iTunes.
So did you work on hooking your website up to create the podcast feed and then register it with iTunes and all that? Were you involved in that process?
I was not involved with that.
Okay.
That's something the whole web development team takes care of.
Right.
Yeah, I prep it, I make sure the metadata is right, I write the copy for the particular shows usually, and then I upload it.
Great. So, Mary, are you still thinking about doing your own podcast?
Well, I'm starting to do a video one for WFMT, so that's keeping me busy at the moment. I was going to try to do maybe an audio-only podcast on my own, but I've got a lot on my plate at the moment, so we're going to go with this at the moment. Yeah, so my video podcast series, hopefully, is I'm having classical musicians sit down with and talk with non-classical musicians. So,
that sounds cool.
Yeah, so I shot 2 episodes. I'm video editing them. I'm a slow as heck video editor. Audio I can do in my sleep. In my sleep. Video, very slow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been pretty cool. I had the pianist Marta Aznavourian of the Lincoln Trio. They've been Grammy nominated classical trio. She happens to love hard rock.
Oh.
And I had her sit down with Stephen Gillis, who is the former drummer of Filter. And it was a great conversation. So I'm still editing that. So hopefully that will be out soon.
That is awesome. I remember the band Death, which isn't around anymore, but they were like, they would just sit around and play jazz and classical music, and then they would, like, when they went to play, they would just play like death metal. But within the death metal, the musicianship is tremendous, but they're playing something so heavy.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, I think there's probably more commonalities between the music than the similarities, really.
Right? Totally.
Yeah, because Marta was talking about all the passion in Brahms to go from, like, very tranquil and quiet to this absolute rage. And she's like, that's what she feels like hard rock does as well. So, I mean, I think we share a lot of similarities.
Yeah, totally. Hey, Barry, you used to listen to death metal and different music like that, right? So what did you hear when you listened to that kind of stuff?
And they were cussing up a storm. Profanities left, profanities right.
Profanities left, profanities right? Really? What else?
Every second word was a F word.
All right. I don't know about every second word. All right. So let's go on site, Mary Mazurek from Chicago.
Okay. So I do a series called the Day Myra Hess Memorial Concert broadcast, and that's a remote live broadcast. I do a few others as well, but that's my every Wednesday thing. So I go to the Chicago Cultural Center downtown for that one. So it's a beautiful old building. It used to be the old Chicago Public Library, and it was going to be torn down many decades ago, but the original Mayor Daley's wife said, no, I want to make this a cultural center. So it's free and open to the public, and it has like art galleries and concerts, classical, from classical like to house music and, all kinds of stuff. So this is my Wednesday thing, and I've been doing it for so long, and it happens every week, and I actually just store equipment there. The station lets me just store equipment there.
Nice.
Yeah, because my back is like not happy with dragging stuff around. So I can actually mic more simply here because it's a concert hall. And as I was saying, concert halls project sound out. And it's classical music, so it's self-balancing, and this is the kind of setting you would hear classical music in. So I don't have to mic so much. So I can usually get away with just one single stereo pair.
Wow.
To capture, the whole ensemble, whatever that is.
Right.
I'm still using placement because it's a public building and it's not totally isolated. We're off of Michigan Avenue, which is a major street, and there are big plate glass windows, so it's not the quietest environment, unfortunately.
Okay.
But I will place the stereo pair somewhat close, at least in terms of classical music. So, because I still want you to hear the space, but I don't want you to hear all the space.
Got it.
Yeah. So then I have cables and I have it run into my mixer, which is nothing spectacular. It's a Mackie.
Small Mackie.
Yeah, right? Small Mackie.
Yeah.
It gets the job done. So I have the pair come into there. I also have an announcer sitting next to me in the booth, so you can see the performers and call the play-by-play, so to speak.
Right.
And then I send it out to a codec. So it's an encode-decode device, and it's sent over ISDN back to the station, and it's decoded with another device and put on the air.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, ISDN is rock solid. It's sending out a stream, so it's encoding it to MPEG-2 layer 3, which is like MP3.
Got it.
But sending it out as a stream, so it is rock solid. It's stable. I rarely have any issues with the ISDN stuff. Unfortunately, it's darn expensive to have an ISDN phone line.
Right. Because
it's a secure line, so the only people who use it are banks, and the phone company figured this out. So it's like, oh, we can charge you like $800 a month for it.
Oh.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one venue was like, we cannot maintain an ISDN line, so we're gonna have to find another way. So there's some other technology where you can send it over IP. It's not as stable. It's somewhat subject to packet loss, so occasionally I get some dropouts or some artifacts, which I'm not that happy about. But the powers that be were at NAB, and they were looking at some of the newer technology, so it's looking promising. But at some point, it looks like we're going to go away from ISDN. It's just so cost prohibitive to do that, which is unfortunate because it's rock solid.
Right. That's there's got to be another solution. So when you're there, you just have the stereo mic coming into the little Mackie. You're not doing any other processing to it. Are you doing any EQing, compression, anything
usually
before
not.
It goes out? Yeah.
No, usually not. I'm using processing, but not in like an outboard sense. I'm using it through placement of the mics, because Air makes a pretty good compressor, so I can vary distances. I can vary positionings and stereo techniques to get certain equalization characteristics. So I do it that way there. I mean, if I have larger ensembles, I'll mic more. But if it's like violin and piano, it's almost always just a stereo pair there.
Okay. And kind of I won't say it's a silly question, but if you're miking up classical music and classical musicians, a lot of times in classical, they're really quiet. And sometimes when they start, they're really quiet. So
Sometimes.
Right, sometimes. So how do you get a good level? How do you know? Do you tell them right at the beginning, like, look, play the loudest you're going to play, and do you get the level?
Yeah.
Do you do that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I do. I don't always get a sound check. I will take one if I can get it. I will ask for it, and I will take it. If they don't give it to me, I've been doing broadcasts at least once a week out of this hall for the past 23 plus years.
Right.
So there's very little that surprises me.
Got it.
So, but I will always ask, and I will always take it if they are able to give me a sound check. So I basically ask them, can you play the loudest you're going to play? And can you play the quietest you're going to play? So at least I know kind of what the dynamic range is. And then usually on this Wednesday series, they're younger artists, so some of them are not quite as accomplished experience. They're really good, don't get me wrong,
right.
But they're not, they haven't been playing for 20 years on the concert stage.
Right.
So sometimes they get nervous, and sometimes when they get nervous, they play louder. So even when they give me their loud and sound check, I'll usually back it down just a hair, just to make sure I have enough headroom to accommodate, because digital clipping is not pretty.
Yeah. Do you ever ride the master fader of your?
I do sometimes ride it. I do ride the fader a little bit. But with the classical music, like most of my work is in sound check. If I can get it balanced and whatnot during sound check, I don't usually need to move too much of anything.
Got it. Mm-hmm. And what is some do you ever get feedback from maybe the engineers back at the station in the air studio? Do they ever comment on the sound or the level or anything?
Sometimes, yeah. Okay. Sometimes. We were having issues at one point where the levels were coming back low, and I just said, you know what? Just text me. I can adjust. I mean, I can't. Once they throw it to me, I can't really monitor the station. I've got to monitor what's going through my board.
Right.
And even if I can, I have to plug right into the ISDN box, and it's got like a half a second delay. And I'm sitting in the room with the musicians. I'm not totally isolated, so I can't really hear.
Right.
So I'm just like, just text me and I'll make adjustments. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Slack.
Right. And no, but overall, no news is good news. If you don't hear anything, it's fine. Every once in a while, I'll get wow, that sounded really good. And I'm going, yay.
Oh, cool.
Because as an audio engineer, usually you don't hear anything until, unless something's wrong.
Right, exactly. If everything's fine and no one cares.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So I didn't ask you, the stereo pair mics that you use, what are they?
Well, it depends on the venue and stuff. At the Cultural Center, I like to use 414s. They're AKG, large diaphragm, switchable pattern. For me, I think those are if I'm trapped on a desert island, that's the pair I'd want to have.
Yeah.
Because they're flexible. They sound good on everything.
Yeah. And they got the bass roll off and a lot of, I know used to a lot of overhead mics for drum kits would use 414s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're good for vocals. They're good for instruments they just work on everything. But I also really, really like my Schoeps. So those are some nice German microphones.
Is that more in studio? Use the Schoeps?
Yeah, I'll also use the Schoeps on remote as well in pairs. I own a pair myself. The station owns 2 pairs. Sometimes I use all of them in the studio, and I think they sound really good on strings. They sound really good on voice. But they have a really big reach. So that means that they sound like they're close even though they're not close. So I can have distance between them and the sound source.
I see.
And it'll still sound present.
And what about the individual mics you have on individual instruments?
And that varies too. I like the Schoeps for that. I also have some Neumann KM184s and some B&K, now they're known as Danish Pro Audio DPA mics for spot mics, and some Shures, and it depends what the instrumentation is. Right.
Yeah, there's such a variation with the music you're recording that
yeah, ping pong balls and a piano require different miking from.
Oh man, we got to hear that. Do you have a copy of that?
Yeah, that's a piece by Dan Visconti, and it's in a program called Impromptu on WFMT's site. And the ensemble is called Fifth House.
Okay, so you definitely give me a link to that. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Because I want to hear it too.
Ping pong balls and the piano. It actually sounds a little bit harpsichord-like after they're in there and she's playing it.
Right, so as it's being played, they're continuing to bounce around.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Right.
Well, I got to hear that. So we'll put the link in the show notes. Mary,
right,
I'm so happy that you were able to come back and share all this with us. I mean, this is it's a wonderful process, broadcasting live on the radio, and it takes a certain amount of spontaneity and being in the moment as an engineer, because it's not like you could say, all right, hold on guys, hold on, stop. I forgot to put this fader up. Start that song again.
You can't. You can't. You just have to. You have to go.
Yeah. Oh, but when you're on location, do you record locally?
I do.
Okay.
Nothing special, just like a flash recorder.
Okay. And then that's the one you probably use to master and put on a podcast if it does go on a podcast. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, they make an air check back at the station, but it's going to be better quality from the one on site. So I use that one.
Okay. Yeah. That's perfect. So there you go. So if you're ever in Chicago, if you're listening to this and you're ever in Chicago on a Wednesday, can people go to the performance?
Yes, they can. So it's at the Chicago Cultural Center, 78 East Washington, 3rd floor, 12:15 to 1 on Wednesday.
So you can either listen to it live, and you don't have to be in Chicago. You can listen to the live stream on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And Mary, are you ever on the air? Is your voice ever been on the radio?
Yes, it has. Okay. Yeah, usually I hide behind the technology, but they did have an Engineer Appreciation Day. One day. It was kind of awesome. So there's like 6 of us who do live music for FMT, and we got to talk about what we do and play some examples. But they've also been having me on for pledge drives, so make my little appearance on all the pledge drives now.
That's awesome. And when they acknowledged all the engineers, did they give you a little monetary bonus there, or at least some, some dessert or something?
Don't I wish?
Some cake? Anyway, I like strawberry shortcake. I mean, that would have been good with me.
I'm going to put that request in.
A couple grand as a thank you. I mean, come on.
I wouldn't turn that down.
Well, some people would say, you just have to ask. But, you don't want to just get yourself shot down.
Right. Well, I did get a raise, so I'm kind of happy about that. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mary, this has been awesome. I know our audience really loves to hear from you and all that you're doing. And really, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, what does this have to do with podcasting? It's called general knowledge. It's called depth of knowledge and breadth of knowledge. And that's what happens when you're an engineer. You hear things, you absorb information, you hear about certain microphones, and you just take it all in, and it becomes part of you, so that the next time you're doing a podcast, for instance, and something comes up, there's a problem, something might trigger in your mind. You might remember something from this episode. You might. And then, so that's the whole power in this. That's why I wanted to talk with Mary this whole episode about the live broadcasting, and then of course turning it into a podcast is easy, but the whole, the recording and the live broadcasting is the thing. So Mary, great job. And someday, I don't know, well, Podcast Movement's not in Chicago this year, so I won't be coming to Chicago. So anyway, someday we'll have to have a reunion.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, Mary Mazurek. And thank you so much for listening. This has been great. I really appreciate all the feedback you guys give me. If there's anything you want to hear on this show, let me know. If there's any guests you want me to interview on this show, please let me know. PodcastEngineeringSchool.com is the website. Check out our programs and everything we're doing. And I'm just happy to be doing this. I mean, you can tell I love it. And Barry loves it too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So Barry's awesome. All right. So until next time, everybody, you know what to say, Mary. Sound great!
Walk away from me where you can play that part so well, but you're playing out on me now. You like to lose control where it's quite a feeling, isn't it? They're floating, drifting down now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What the you far from me where some change the game and give away. Say I wouldn't understand now. Tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now it's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What that you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. Give me answer and play. I want you to know you were always with through. I gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did still hold their meaning. And does it mean it's still the same? You're pushing me away. You work your theory